Today we're going to be drawing this lily with colored pencils. Now I do have the reference photo and the line art, and I have some of the colors that I've planned to use as well available for you down in the description, so go ahead and check that out. Lilies are one of my favorite flowers to draw, and I was immediately drawn to this one because of the colors in the flowers. Now this was part of a much bigger bouquet of flowers, but I decided to just focus on one. So if you did want to go ahead and draw the whole bouquet, I did include that reference photo as well. But I figured today we'll just start with one, and then you can kind of just use the techniques and the methods that we're going to use here today to do the rest of the flowers. Now I am just going to go over all of the supplies that I'm going to use, but if you just want to skip right ahead to the tutorial, I will have the timestamp on the screen right now for you. Now I will try to have all of my supplies linked in the description down below so you can check them out if you want, but I am using hot pressed watercolor paper today. Now this is the Paul Rubens smooth hot press watercolor paper. I've never used this paper before, so I'll see how I like it as we go through this tutorial. I like hot press watercolor papers for my colored pencils because I can get a lot of layering, but they're not as toothy as the cold pressed or rough pressed, so you still get that nice smooth look. Now to help create that nice smooth look, I am going to be using my Gamsol odorless mineral spirits. Now this is made for art supplies, so make sure if you're going to be doing this, using this, you get an art supply one. So something like this, or they also have the Mona Lisa odorless mineral spirits. I like both. They work both the same. Now, instead of keeping mine in this bottle, I keep it in this little mason jar. I put a piece of cotton on the bottom and pour a little bit on there. And then that way, when I go to dab with my brush, I just pick up enough that I need. And I always have a paper towel available, and I will just pick it up, dab it off if I have too much. And then that's how I'm going to blend the bottom layers of my colored pencil. Now, if you don't mind that little bit of a grainy look with your colored pencil, you don't have to do the blending technique. You can just lay down the first layer of colors and then go on top with the details like I will afterwards. Or if you don't want to use the Gamsol, you can just layer a little bit more of the colored pencil down until it's a little bit smoother. But we're going to use a light to medium hand on our first layers just so that we don't put too much down and then we can't go on with our details on top. So that's where I like to use this because it gives me almost like a painterly look when I blend it out. And then I can go on top and add some more of those finer details to really get the flowers or whatever subject I'm using to pop. Now, just looking at the reference photo, these are some of the colors that I've picked out that I'm planning to use. This is available for you to download down in the description box below. Now, I always include white and black with my colors, so if you don't have those, then go ahead and pause this and go grab your white and black pencil. Now, I may take away some colors or add some colors as we get going, but this is my initial look of the colors that I'm going to use. Now, I do have some Faber-Castell's Prismacolors. These are the Derwent Lightfast pencils, and then I've got Caran d'Ache Luminance as well. So those are the 4 pencils that I use. Now, the reason I've included this with my color swatches is so if you don't have all of these brands of pencils, maybe you only have Prismacolor or Caran d'Ache Luminance, or maybe you have a different set, you can look at the colors and just pick the pencils that you have that are close enough. And how I do this is I actually just take a sheet of extra paper and I will scribble on it and I'll hold it up to my reference photo, whether it's on my computer monitor or if I've printed it out. I'll just hold it against that and see what colors, you know, are close enough to that. And that's how I choose my colors. And if you have any other questions about supplies or techniques that I'm using, I'm going to try to explain everything the best that I can as I go through this. But if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the comments down below and I will go ahead and answer them as best I can. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Now I am going to try to go ahead and put the reference photo somewhere on the screen here. So if you do like that, let me know and I'll continue to do that for further tutorials. If you don't like it and you just want me to zoom in even more on the artwork, then please let me know in the comments below. I think I'm going to start with the stem here first because it does have some of our darkest colors in here, so it'll help us judge our values a little bit. And it's a small area, so we can get that done and get that blended out, and then we can focus on the petals. Now, the first thing I want to do here is just take my kneaded eraser, and I'm going to go ahead and lighten the stem up just a little bit. Now I've tried to keep my lines here on this a little bit darker so you can kind of see what I've gone for. And I've also included the line art for you in the description down below. So you can always go ahead and take that and print it out and then use that, you know, to trace onto whatever paper that you want to use. And because a lot of these colors aren't going to be that light, we don't have to get rid of every line that we have. Now, I do like to keep my kneaded erasers in here. So I have one for graphite and colored pencils, and then I keep this one for my pastel works, just so I don't get them contaminated. And I keep them in a little container here just so they don't dry out or I don't get any pet hair or anything on them. Now I'm going to go for my lightest green here, and this is Earth Green from Faber-Castell. And I'm just going to start filling in up here, I think. And I'm going to start with all these little, I think these are called the stamens maybe of the flower. And again, I'm using a light to medium pressure. I would say more on the light side than anything. And I might actually just sharpen this up a little bit. Most of my pencils here are quite sharp, especially for these smaller areas, but I do want to get this one just a little bit sharper. And I just like to use the Derwent crank hand sharpener for that. I think I actually have a video about that on my channel, so I'll go ahead and try to link that down below. Now these are such small parts of the flower here, but it's sort of part of the focal point too. Almost the whole flower is the focal point, but because these come up, I do want to make sure that we get these in pretty good. Now you can keep your lines a little bit darker if you want, because like I said, you know, this color is a little bit darker than our graphite lines. Depending what you've used, you know, to get your artwork onto the paper. Now I did draw this out myself right onto the paper, and I do have some erase lines like here and there, like within the flower itself. So we'll see how this paper handles erasing and then doing colored pencil on top. Some papers I have no problems with that, like the Arches hot pressed paper, and then some papers like the Medine hot press paper, that one, if I want to draw something on that, I will do it on tracing paper first, and then I will transfer it onto that paper, just because it doesn't do as well with erasing over and over. So we'll see how this paper is. Now again, I'm focusing sort of, I want to get this color down a little bit everywhere, but mainly on the like mid to bottom part of these, because we do have some shadows, especially over on this side and the bigger stem. There is some shadows, so I want to make sure I'm leaving, you know, space for that, and that I'm not pushing too hard, so those areas will show up. Now down here where all the lines kind of meet up, it does get a little bit confusing, so it might be helpful for us to take our mid-tone, which would be my olive green from Prismacolor. I'm going to start getting this in. And just coming up where I see some of these shadows in between these little stems or stamens. And this does overlap this one here, so we want to make sure we get a nice defined edge. Now, once we get into the petals, it will be a lot more fun because we've got some more fun colors in there. So sometimes I like to start on places that I'm not, you know, as fond of with my art, like places that aren't as fun and maybe I don't want to put in as much time or detail or something. It just depends. And usually I like to start sometimes with the darkest areas, like I said, because that'll help us judge the values in the other parts of the artwork, but sometimes it just depends where I want to start too. So I'm just getting this in, and I'm still not pushing hard at all. Like, I'm really just pushing the weight of the pencil plus like a little tiny bit. I'm going to start getting this in down here. Now there is a little bit of green on some of these petals back here, but I'm going to wait and get that in when I do the petals because I want a little bit more of a blended look there. Now this stem is a little bit more muted in color, but I am using some brighter greens as well. And then I've got that more like Viridian type green too, just because I think it's going to look nice with the colors in the petals. So sometimes I decide to use, you know, colors that I might not see in the reference photo, but I think are going to look nice. Okay. So I'm just making sure I know where that edge is. And then we've got this one coming down. There's not a whole lot of dark in here, but I'm going to put a little bit just at the top. And maybe right here. Next to that little stamen. And then I'll grab that light color again and just fill in this here. Now that we can kind of see where this one comes. And I might even darken that one up just a little bit. Just along this edge. So if I do want to define an edge, I will push a little bit harder. Not enough to burnish, but enough that I'll get like a nice clean edge, and then we'll just fade that down. Just so that it does kind of pop from that back color. And then I'm just going to go ahead and fill in this bigger area here. And just continue to get some of this color in. And with colored pencils, it is all about sort of layering and going back and forth. And if you don't like something, if you don't like a color, put another color on top, you know. You can really do a lot with colored pencils. So that's why they're definitely one of my favorites. Okay, and then this one is kind of coming down here, but it's all sort of like one block here, and then you can kind of see a little bit broken up down here. So I'll just get a little in. Doesn't need to be too defined, because again, I don't want this to be our focal point, even though in the reference photo it sort of is. I want more on the petals, so I'll have more detail in the petals than I will here, if that makes sense. Again, just coming along and just defining some of these edges more in the top part of these. And I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to bring this mid-tone color up a little bit more. Now, if you find when you're resting your hand, depending how big you've drawn this, or if you've, you know, printed it out at a larger size, like let's say you want to do an 8x10, I think this is a 5x7. But if you wanted to do it bigger and you find when you're resting your hand, if it's actually on your artwork, you could smudge it, or you could get the oils from your hand on there, and then the colors of the colored pencil won't stick as well to that area. So you could always put like a piece of paper over top of it and have your hand down, or you could use a piece of glassine paper I like glassine paper. So, you know, just be aware of that. Because my hand's sort of like outside of my artwork, I'm not too worried about that. But when I come to work over in this petal, I may put something on this side. And I'm just taking that lightest color again and just blending over that a little bit. And I don't really see too much of this down here, but I am going to get a little bit in, maybe just in the middle of it. So I'm just going to kind of just get a little bit of this down here, because we would have a darker shadow here and more on the outside of it because it is a round 3D object. So I'm just going to lay this sort of in here, and then we'll lay our other colors over top of that. So I'm going to grab that darker color now. This is the Prismacolor Peacock Green, 907. I guess I should say the numbers since I've put the numbers on here for you all. So I'll do that. I'll say the 907 for now. So let me know if you'd rather me write the name down or the numbers for you. Either way, I mean, you should be able to find the pencils that I'm using. So I'm going to get this one down here. So this will be my darkest green shadows, I think. And then once we get it blended out a little bit more, I'll be able to tell if I need to add like a black or even a darker green. And I'm actually just widening this up a little bit up there at the top, just slightly. And just kind of bringing this down the right-hand side a little bit. And then I'm just going to bring just a very little bit into some of those darker areas that I added the mid-tone green. And then I'll define some of these little areas down here, and I am going to get a little bit of this down here. Now I'm sort of doing more like little circles or little lines because these are like straight areas, like when I'm coloring. So whenever you're laying down colored pencil, you sort of want to go in the direction of whatever your drawing is going. So for the petals, like when we're doing it this way, I'm not just going to go straight. I'm going to go with the curve of the petal, if that makes sense. So same with this, because this is a fairly straight object, I am going to go, you know, sort of straight. And then when it curves like this, I'm going to go more curved. So I hope that makes sense. Okay. So I'm going to start laying this in down here, and I want a nice clean edge there. So I did push just a little bit harder. And I'm keeping this more towards the edges. And I'm just going back over that spot. I really want this to pop a little bit. And I might add just a little bit more right up here, just so that it really connects. Okay. And then I'm going to take that mid-tone green and sort of go over everything. So this is the 911 from Prismacolor. But I am going to leave a little bit of this still showing, our lightest green. And if we don't like that area in the middle, we can always go over top of it. And I'm going like around the edges of it, but I'm leaving just the very middle of it You know what, I might just go lightly over the whole thing because I don't want it to be really as light as these up here. So I'm just gonna go over the whole thing, but more towards the edges still. And I'm trying to get up to the edge here, but okay. So I think I like that for that. And then we're gonna go in with our Faber-Castell. This is the 192. And I'm gonna start filling in these little floofy things. I don't know what they're called, but I think they're part of the stamen here. And I'm just doing little circles to fill this in. Now we do need enough layers down for our colored pencils to blend, especially if we're using something like the odorless mineral spirits. You could use like the colorless pencil blender from whatever brand that you like. I just find the odorless mineral spirits blends things a little bit nice and smooth, and I won't lose the tooth of the paper because I'm not pushing very hard at all for this. Now the only time I do push hard, like I said, is just around the edges when I want a defined edge, but again, it's not, I wouldn't say this is a burnishing pressure. This is sort of more of like a medium pressure, where this is my light to medium pressure. But I'm just constantly going over those areas so that it'll fill in the tooth a little bit more. Now I am noticing this is quite a smooth paper because, as you can see, you can still see a little bit of the paper behind it, but it's pretty smooth. Like, I figure if I layer a little bit more over this, it's gonna smoothen out a lot more. Now, am I gonna lose some of that tooth of the paper, like when I go over to do some of my details? I don't know. So we'll find out as this tutorial goes on. So use whatever paper that you like for your colored pencils. Now I'm just going to go ahead and outline these real quick while this is still got a sharper point to it. And this just helps when I'm using the Gamsol. It sort of gives me like a stopping point. And some areas, like when we go to blend in the petals, I'll want a more like smooth blended look, so I won't do such sharp lines like this. And again, don't be too like perfect with this. Flowers come in all different shapes. Even these come in all different like sizes and shapes. So if one's a little misshapen, that's totally fine. Nobody's gonna notice. Same with a petal. Like, some of these petals are a little more crinkly, some of them are a little straighter. Like, nobody's gonna know unless they saw your reference photo if it's exact. Now, if you're drawing somebody's pet, then you want it to be exact, right? Like, you want all the markings and everything to be in the exact spots. But when you're just drawing from a reference photo and it's just you seeing it, you know, things really don't have to be exact. Close is good enough. Now, some of these little green bits, I am going just over the edge a little bit, the ones that we can see in the back. But not too much because they are pretty defined. And I tend to kind of rotate my pencil in my hand because I'll do one side a little bit and I wear it down and then I kind of flip it. So I have like a nice sharp point again. And then I kind of rotate it a little bit. And that just helps me not have to sharpen these as often. But if I really want little fine details, then I'll go ahead and sharpen them. Now the Polychromos, you can sharpen them a bit more than most of the other pencils. I find the Derwent Lightfast are actually pretty good for getting a nice sharp point too, and they won't break on you. But pencils like the Prismacolor, those do break pretty easily, so I try not to get too sharp of a point for them. I do like those for like the bottom details because they do blend out so smoothly. And then sometimes I just choose the pencil based on it's the color that I want. Now I am going to go ahead and take this Faber-Castell purple. This is the 136. And we are going to use this in our flower a little bit, so I wanted a color that we're already going to be using. And there are just some of these areas that I can see some dark areas in. So I may put this in, and I may even use a little bit of that like Viridian green if this is not dark enough, because right now I don't think this is going to be dark enough. And then if I need to go over it, I can always use my black or something at the end. But I like to almost reuse or like recycle colors that I'm using in the piece and try to make those work first before I just jump to my black pencil. So I'm just trying to follow the shape of that. So we've got a little bit here in the middle and a little bit more on this left edge. And again, this first layer doesn't have to be perfect because we can always come back over top and fix things up. So I'm just really trying to get this in. And I can't see these little black spots because my lines are all covered up, so I'm just kind of eyeing them a little bit. Now we do have a little bit on the edge here. And then again, more of the shadows on this side. Now here on these middle areas, I am pushing a little bit more just because they are a little more defined. And then these edges are a little more blended. So again, I'm using a lighter hand. Now these back ones where we can see the this little stem come up into the back of it, it is a little bit bigger and a little bit wider, whereas these ones are more little lines. So pay attention to that in the reference photo. Actually, this one I think I could pull out a little bit more onto that side. There, so here I am doing a little bit of a bigger area around it. And I'm just trying to roughly follow that shape. Now again, here it's a little more line-like. We've got a bigger one here, and then just very lightly, and then another one that kind of comes down and almost connects to the bottom. This one is a little more curved. Now, even though I'm holding my pencil up here, and sometimes I tend to grip it quite hard, so it looks like I'm really pushing hard, but I promise you I'm not. For some reason, I just really like to grip my pencils. So I think I like that. And I think I am going to take this Derwent Lightfast Sapphire. This we're going to use in the petals a little bit, but I'm going to put some up here in this part, and then I think I'm also going to put some, you know what, before I do that, I'm going to fill this in with our, I'm going to go with the olive green, the 911, just a very light one, just because we've used these colors all in the other stems. And then I'm going to go in with that bluish green color. Just a little bit. Sort of more in the middle and a little bit in the front here. And then I can see a very strong blue color, so I'm going to use that Sapphire from the Derwent Lightfast. Again, use whatever colors you have, but I'm just glazing this color right over. And just defining those edges there. And I may even lighten this a little bit, so I may come back with an eraser and just lighten that before I blend it out. I just want to hit some of these lines here and just darken them up slightly with this sapphire blue color. Just some of these shadow areas. Just because I think the combination of the colors are going to look nice. So I'm not worrying being too precise. I just want to get a hint of this in some of those darker spots. Okay, so I think I like that. And I am going to take my, this is the Faber-Castell Perfection Eraser. Now it is a little bit more gritty, but I find it gets rid of colored pencil pretty good, and especially before we blend it out. So I'm just going to come here, and I can use the back side to kind of wipe that away. I just want to create a little bit of a light defined edge here. I still want those colors there, but I just want that top part to really pop. Now this is kind of stiff, so sometimes it doesn't get rid of all of the dust left over, so I do like a softer brush like this, and that's not going to smudge any of the colored pencil. Now before we go ahead and blend it out, I just need to make sure that we have enough layers on the paper, so I'm just going to go over all of these lighter areas and just sort of these stems here one more time. This is just the lightest color that I'm using, the 172 from Faber-Castell. And some of these stems I'm just kind of making sure they're nice and straight, and if I need to make them a little bit thicker, I can do that as well. And I'm going to get this color down here as well. Okay, so I think we're ready to blend that. Now, again, if you're not going to blend out with your, actually, I'm just going to grab that Faber-Castell 192 and just go over these lightest areas here. Just one more time, just to make sure everything's nice and easy. Because if you don't have enough layers of the colored pencil, it's not going to blend. It's still going to give you that gritty, grainy look. And you'll see once I start blending this out, it is going to blend nicely. Okay, so I'm just going to go get all my stuff for that. We will get this blended out. I'll show you exactly how I do that, and then we'll start on our petals. So like I explained at the beginning, I'm going to be using my Gamsol odorless mineral spirits. Now, these are, you know, mineral spirits, so you don't want to have it open, especially if you're in an enclosed place inside. So I always keep it in a little jar like this where I can keep the top on, and I can just open it and dip my brush in as I need it. Now, because we are doing some smaller areas there, I'm going to be using like a small round brush and then a little bit of a smaller round flat brush. And I just like these cheap ones. This is the Craft Smart. I think I got these either on Amazon or Michael's, and this is the Princeton Snap. I like it because they're a little bit stiffer, so they're going to hold their point as I'm blending this out. Now, if you aren't using the odorless mineral spirits, if you don't mind that grainy, gritty look, that's totally fine. You could leave it at this stage. You could layer up a little bit more, or you can just see how the odorless mineral spirits blend out. But I think I'm going to start with my small brush first, and we'll get some of the smaller details in. So again, I just dip it in, and I'm going to come along these stems here. Now the colors will darken up at first as we're blending, but once it dries, they will dry down a little lighter again. Like the color will go back to what it was, just a little bit smoother. Now, I don't know if I'm liking this round brush. I think it's a little too flimsy. The tip isn't as stiff, so I'm going to try this one, and I'm going to try just doing the edge of it and see how I like that. I think this one's working a little bit better for me. Now, depending how big your brush is, if you're really messy when you're blending this out, you may be pushing a little bit of that pigment outside of your lines. That's okay depending what is going to go on the background behind it. You may be able to cover it up with some of the colors, and because there's a little bit of the green back here as well, that's not going to be too bad, but I don't want to be like really pushing and scrubbing this color around too much, just because I don't want this to really get into our pink details that are around here, because that will mute them down a little bit. So I am trying to be careful around the edges, and that's why I like a stiffer brush, because I can really get right up against that edge and blend this color out. Now you'll see in the darker areas here just how nicely this is blending this out. It's really giving like that painterly look. Now colored pencil isn't going to blend around too much. You can pull it a little bit, but really it depends on the colors that you lay down. So it will like blend and pull a little bit, but not as much as, let's say, watercolor or gouache. You know, when you're blending that, the paint is really going to move around to wherever you put your brush. And again, I'm trying to be careful around those edges. Now, if you need to use a smaller brush than this, that's totally fine. And I find dipping it into the cotton too, it sort of like limits the amount that I can pick up on this, but I can always dab it off onto my paper towel if I find, you know, that I'm picking up too much. And if I want to blend into a different color, the odorless mineral spirits is also a brush cleaner, so I can just dip it in and then wipe it onto here, and then now I can go into a lighter color or a different color. If you're blending out, you know, green and red and you don't want them to mix, then I would just clean it off and dip it onto the side. So now I'm going to blend these little parts here, and I'm really not being super careful. You can see I'm just going over the whole thing, and it's blending out pretty nicely. Now I don't want to be putting my hand in where I, you know, had that mineral spirit, so I'm just flipping that around. Now the drier your brush is, the harder it's going to be to blend out, especially if you don't have enough layers of colored pencil. So if you find you're not getting like a smooth transition or a smoother look, like it's not filling the tooth of the paper, you can still see the white of the paper through, then you either don't have enough of the odorless mineral spirits on your brush, or you don't have enough layers down that the colored pencil just can't be pushed into the tooth of the paper, because this is all it's doing. It's just filling up the tooth of the paper, and that's exactly what I want. Now, like I said, this does get dark at first, but it will dry down lighter. So you'll see the difference as it dries. Now I am going to clean this off because I just want to go ahead and blend that stem just a little bit more. And we can come back and put more details on top. And then I'll go ahead and blend the stem down here. Now I'm starting more in that middle area, and then I'm sort of like pushing that color to the edges. And I always try to start in the lightest areas and go to the dark, just because if some of that color does pull it, I want more of the light area to pull in the dark versus pulling the dark down into an area that I want to keep light. Because again, with colored pencils, even though we're not pushing very hard right now, we can go over top with some lighter areas, like the white will show up because we didn't fill in the tooth of the paper completely. However, I do like to keep some of those whiter areas or lighter areas light just from the colored pencils themselves, and then it's going to make it that much easier to go over top and get lighter details on top. All right, so I'm just cleaning this brush off really good, and I keep doing it until it comes out, you know, pretty clean. And you can see as I'm dabbing too, some color is coming off onto that, so that also helps to clean your brush in between colors. But I don't like to contaminate this too much, then I have to keep changing it, and then I feel like I'm just wasting whatever Gamsol is already in that sponge, so I just use a regular paper towel like that. And then I just put the top back on and put that off to the side, and we can continue on. Now, because this area is wet right now, just the stem area, you don't want to go over top of that with colored pencil right now. You will rip the tooth of the paper. It won't be good, trust me. So we'll start working on our petals. And then once this dries, we can come over top and do any little details or touch-ups that we need to do. Now, I am going to go ahead and just lighten up some of the petals here, sort of more where I can see that light blue color, just because I don't know if my graphite lines will show through that. Now some of the areas we have a little bit darker blue, so I don't really need to get rid of too much. But where I think that color is going to show through, I'm definitely going to go over top. Now you can rub like that, but I find just got some pencil dust there. I find just tapping it gets off just enough of the pencil. If I rub too much, then I get rid of my lines completely, and I don't want to do that. I just want to just lighten it a little bit. But like I said, I was trying to keep my lines a little bit darker so you can definitely see, you know, what I'm looking at, what I'm focusing on. And I am trying to keep this completely in real time. So that you guys can follow along and see, you know, exactly what I'm doing. Now, some of these areas where we've got the petal that kind of curves and then we've got another petal coming on, I am going to try to keep that a little bit darker, for now at least, just so that we don't lose our place. Sometimes if you erase too many lines, then you don't know what's going on anymore. So if you think you're going to get confused with any of these petals, just leave them, like leave the lines a little bit darker. If a little bit of the graphite shows through, it's not a big deal. It just looks like you drew it onto the paper, you know, so sometimes it can go with the look that you're going for. Okay, so I think I'm going to start with this Faber-Castell. This is the 154. Now I'm going to use this for some of these lighter blues that I see in here. So we have like a darker blue, a little bit more of a purpley tone, and then a pink. I'm using this now. This is a little bit more of like a teal, like icy blue or cobalt. This is the light cobalt turquoise. So it's not the exact same color that I see in the photo, but I like this color, so that's why I've chosen this one to go in my lighter areas. And I am just going to grab a piece of paper, just whatever scrap paper that I have, just to put over top of this, just so that I'm not rubbing on the paper with my hand as we go through some of these petals. I can find my glassine paper afterwards, which is a little bit more see-through, so as we get more down, you'll still be able to see through it a little bit, but this will be okay for now. You know what, I am just going to lighten in here a little bit, just along this edge here. Just because some of the light colors are going there too. Now I am going right over this edge here, but again, not pushing very hard. And then we start to get into some of that darker blue. So I'm just really going to focus this in this area. And for our bottom layers, because again, I'm going to blend this all out, I don't have to be like super precise in what direction, but I don't want to do little scribblies, because again, that could not blend out as nicely, especially depending what pencils you're using, what paper you're using. So I want it to at least be smooth. And I'm just looking at all of this light blue area here. And I really love this blue color. Now, if I do go back and forth like this, like I said, I want it to be more in the direction of the petals. So I can do that as well. Now this picture for me, because it is a 5x7, I'm not going to be able to get as much detail in as I would if it were like a bigger picture, like an 8x10 or 11x14 or something like that. So the larger your picture is, the more detail you will be able to get in. So keep that in mind. But we're going to get in as much as we can. So I'm going to bring that down just a little bit, but it gets more like light pink. But I just want an ever so slightly, like I'm barely kind of touching there. And I do want to pull this color a little bit into where the purple is going to be. And we've got a little bit of a light edge here. Now I'm going to try to get all of our base layer done in one video, I think. I should have time to do all that. And then probably in a part 2, we'll come on top and do all of our details, I'm thinking. And then that way I can really take my time and really do a good, you know, a good job, get the details in that I want. Now it gets a little pink here, but again, I want to overlap those colors so that you don't have just a sharp transition from pink, purple, blue. We want to make sure they all overlap. Now, once I get my colors down, because again, I don't want to fill up too much of the details or fill up too much tooth of the paper, I can always come back like I did with this and just put a little bit more color down so I have enough to blend out. But I'm just going to go ahead and put this light color over the areas that I see it now while I have it. And again, some of that dark blue will overlap with this. But I do see a little hint kind of showing through. Again, I'm just pushing ever so slightly harder when I want a defined edge. Now, there was like sort of a little thing here where it was like, I couldn't tell if it was like a petal overlapping or this folding up. I just decided not to put that in. So we're just gonna, I think it's like a little petal slightly overlapping or something, but we're just gonna continue on and make that up. So again, I'm going in the direction. Now this will be like slightly darker here and there, but again, we need to get those base light blues in. Now, if you want to follow the colors exactly, I would pick a little bit more like of a true blue, almost like a little bit lighter of a color than this one. So you can see the color difference here. I just really like this color, so that's why I picked it, but I would pick a lighter color than that if you want it to keep it true to the reference photo. And again, I'm just trying to follow those shapes. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm just going to come right over top. Of most of this here, just very, very light. So this is sort of like that purple, like middle area there. So I am trying to stay away from there, but I'm going to come up close to it. And again, I am scribbling back and forth, but whoops, as I throw my pencil. But like I said, I'm keeping in the direction of the petal. So that's going to be the difference. Now it gets into a little bit more like purpley pink down here, so I don't want this color competing too much with that. Now I do see this light blue almost kind of coming down this edge quite a bit. So I'm going to get that in, but very light. And then I'll probably come over top with one of my whites just to tone that down a little bit too. Because you can see it's still a lot lighter than this color. So we can do that. We can layer white over top if we want to tone some of these colors down. So this is so light through here, but again, I need color down for it to blend. And this pretty much comes right against the stalk here. Now I did put some of that green, remember that green line there, just so that I'd know where it would stop, and that's my shadow area in there. Now I didn't blend that out because I'll blend that out when I blend the petals. And then I can really see a lot of this blue along this edge too. Just bringing that out ever so slightly here. I want a little bit more of a curve to that. And again, going in the direction of these petals, because there are like little lines and stuff in these flowers. Now again, because it's so small, like we'll get in as much detail as we can. But if it was a lot bigger, you'd get so much more detail in your petals, but then it would take us hours and hours to do. Whereas, you know, I'd like this to be done in maybe 2 videos or something. But if you guys don't mind watching longer tutorials, I don't mind doing larger artworks, and we could do it, you know, in 3 or 4 or maybe even 5, depending, you know, how complicated the subject is. Now this does get light and purpley in here, so I'm just putting a little bit in. So let me know down in the comments below if you know, would prefer like smaller, quicker tutorials. And I am just dragging this out just a little bit, so just creating some lines. And I might even come back and kind of do that in here too. Again, not pushing hard at all, but just helping those colors transition. Yeah, so let me know in the comments below if you would like, you know, longer real-time tutorials, because depending what the subjects are, I could definitely do that. Now some of this gets some darker areas in here, but I'm just going to go over top of it with the light first, and then the dark will be easy to layer over top of that. Now I find this looks weird right now because we've got this area like all blended out and a little bit darker, and this is all light, so it sort of stands out. But once we get everything blended out, it'll look a lot better. So you gotta just trust the process. So this has a little bit of a lighter edge coming, and it's a little more wobbly, so we'll get some darks in there to help. with that. So again, just pulling a little bit of this down where I can see like a little hint of some light blues. Now I can see like a little hint here, but it's hard to tell if it's this petal or this one coming. They're very close, so I'm just going to make sure that that's filled in. Either way. Now same here, there was like a little bit showing, but like my stamens over top of that now. It's totally fine. Again, nobody's gonna know unless they saw the reference photo, and then they'd have to like really be scrutinizing it to notice a tiny detail like that. Now I am going to push just ever so slightly harder here because we do have this light area kind of in this, and then we have some darks around it. So I don't want to lose this light area. So I am going to push just a little harder to kind of make sure I keep these edges. Just because it's such a small area, that would easily get blended out and lost. But I really like that like edge where it's sort of like curling over a little bit like that. And again, this is that area where we can see the side here. So I'm just gonna lightly come over top of that and just really help define this. Then we can see a little bit of blue down here, and then it kind of transitions. So this is where the bottom is, and then it transitions to the top. And once we get more colors in there, that'll be easier to see. So again, I'm really sort of just scribbling back and forth. And I'm leaving a little area just for that very dark blue to go. I'm just sort of following where I can see a little bit of this. I'm going to get a little bit just under here, but again, I'm pushing just hardly. Because again, it's going to be a lot of pink in there. And a little bit just down the middle, I can see a little bit of like blue in there. Same with this one, I'm gonna sort of get a little bit going in there. Now I'm starting with this light edge, so this is all light in here, and then the underneath here is dark. Now I'm just going to just lightly define this. and then it gets a little bit lighter here, so I'm going to push a little bit harder just to keep this color, and then this, it's a little bit darker. And again, where it gets a little bit lighter, again, I'm going to push just so I don't lose that. Because that darker color will like show up right over top of this. And then again, here it gets a little bit darker. And over here as well, it's a little bit darker, but there's a hint of that light color kind of coming through. Now we've got like this purple area for the midline, so I'm coming right up to that. And then I'm going to kind of fill in here. And then lightly, I'm just going to bring this color down here. Now I'm not going to put any here because that's very, very dark. So I don't want any light color in there. Now that could be an area where we need to go over with our black after if the our darkest blues aren't dark enough. And again, this little part here's that underside of this petal. So I'm just making sure I have a hint of that blue here. And then I'm going to come through and just define that edge. And then just kind of ever so slightly define where it starts to go down. And I think those are all the areas I want this light blue right now. And like I said, we can come back and kind of fix any areas up. But I am going to grab my Prismacolor white. And I'm just going to go over a couple of areas now so I don't forget. So I'm just pushing lightly. Just very lightly, but as these blend out, I do want it to be a little bit lighter so that white will blend into it. And because we didn't layer a lot of that blue here along this edge where it's a nice light color and over here, the white will help like layer colored pencil over top of it so that it will blend out nicely. And then if I need to lighten any areas, I can always use this to do that. And I'm just looking if there's any areas like right down here. This is sort of a lighter edge. And again, I'm not burnishing. I'm doing maybe like a, again, light to medium pressure. And then I'll use this afterwards once we get all of our colors down if there's any areas that we need to blend over with white. But I definitely want it to hit those areas. Now I think I'm going to go ahead and use my pink. So this is the Luminance, this is the Caran d'Ache Luminance in 083. I'm going to start getting this in my lighter pink areas. So we'll start over here again. Now I'm not worrying about the darker pink areas that are in here. We'll get that in afterwards. Those will disappear if we put them in now and go to blend them out. I'm actually just going to add just a touch of this blue, kind of just wrapping around this petal a little bit, and maybe just ever so slightly coming down here, just like that. And I'll go back in with this pink. Now I really wanted my colors to pop, so I picked colors that were a little bit brighter. If you want a little softer, more muted pinks and blues, then, you know, by all means pick those colors. So I'm just lightly, and I'm sort of holding this back a little bit more, just because I don't want to put a lot of pressure, and I'm using sort of the side of my pencil too. And then if I want to get up into the smaller areas. Now we do have a very slight amount of that green coming up here, so I'm going to leave a little spot for that. Now I'm just going to start, and you can see like where we're overlapping that with the blue. It is starting to get like a little purpley, but I want it a little bit more purple. So I do have that darker purple that we were using up here earlier if I need to add that, or that can be like details on top. So again, I'm pulling this up just a little bit more than where I really want it or need it. Now I have this coming around here. Now this is a little bit darker down here too because of the shadowing, so we'll layer some darks down there, but I definitely want to get this pink coming in. So we've got our greenish shadow here, but I am just ever so slightly going to bring a little bit of that down. Just so it does overlap there. And again, just light pressure. Now I don't want this to be too straight of a line here, so I am sort of trying to make it a little bit more curved maybe. Now I actually really like the purple color that overlapping these two are creating. So I'm not sure how much of that purple transition color I'm going to use. Now we've got some darker blues coming in here too, so I don't want to pull this color up too much everywhere, but I'm kind of liking this. So I may go back and add more blue to overlap. I'll see. I'll see, because I kind of am liking this. You know what? Let's grab that purpley color right now. So this is the Caran d'Ache Luminance 630. And I'm just going to put this down next to it. Yeah, it's almost the exact same color, to be honest. Okay, I'm going to put this on this petal here. So this is just me experimenting because this is what I was going to use for like my transition color between the pink and the blue. But this blue mixed with this pink just makes a really nice a really nice transition color. So I'm going to kind of just get this on this side of the petal, and then this side we're just going to use those two colors, and we'll see which we like better. So we've still got some of those dark blues coming in, so I don't want to pull this up too high. But I want a little bit of that. So now I'm just going to take that light blue again. That was the Faber-Castell 154. And I'm going to pull this down a little bit more now, where I was going to put that purple color. Because, you know, if I can eliminate a color that's not doing anything for me. Now, the only reason I might use that purple color over this one is just because the Caran d'Ache Luminance blends slightly more than the Polychromos do with the OMS. But if I have enough layers down, like if I just go over it enough like this, then I shouldn't have any issues with it blending out. And again, our first layer doesn't have to be, oh, look at that color. It's almost the exact same. Yeah, I think I'm just going to use these two colors and eliminate that purple. Yeah, so I mean, as long as I have enough layers down on the paper, it's not going to be a problem blending out. And the first layer doesn't have to be perfect, because you could go over again. You could do the exact same again and blend out again if you want it even smoother. So don't worry about that. I'm going to pull this blue down just a little bit more, especially on the side here. Yeah, like I don't even really see, let me look in the camera and see if you guys can see a big difference between those two. No, I honestly don't see a difference. So we're going to put this one away. This is the Caran d'Ache Luminance, the 630. I don't think I'm going to need it, but I will keep the darker purple. So this was the Caran d'Ache Luminance here. So this color plus this color pretty much equals this color. So now if you chose a different blue for your base layer, maybe it's a lighter blue like this, maybe mixing those two aren't going to create like a nice purple for you here. So you may still want to keep this purple as like that transition color. So I'll kind of let you know, well, basically where I've put the blue, you're going to put a little bit of that purple in, and then we're going to transition our pink into that. So the purple will be the transition between the blue and the pink, just in case they don't mix nicely. But if they mix nicely like this, then you can totally eliminate that color. Because why do more work when you don't have to? So I like this. Now I don't want to pull that color up too much. And I'm going to come and push a little bit harder here just so I keep that. And then I'm just going to start pushing on this side. Just so I kind of know where that middle stem part is. But we do have this Faber-Castell that we're going to use, and that would be like a nice area in here. I try to use a lot of my Faber-Castells for my finishing details, and what I mean by details, oh, I didn't even spell that right. Details in the painting means like we'll come on top and create some of those textures on top and get some of those details in, some of those little dots that are in here. But we need to look at our base layer overall before we can put some of those details in. So now I'm just going to go and like pull some of this blue back down. And see, sometimes you have a game plan and then it changes. Like halfway through or as you're starting, you're going, no, that's not going to work, or like, oh, I like this better. So, you know, nothing's set in stone, really. So I'm just pulling this color down a little bit more. And if I want it a little bit more bluey purple, I'll put a little bit more blue. If I wanted a little bit more of a pinky purple, I'll keep that area a little cleaner and have a little bit more of the pink. Like here it's a little bit more pinky purple, but on the side here it's a little bit more blue purple. So that's how I'm deciding that. And then I'll just kind of ever so slightly kind of go over there. Maybe I want just a little bit here, just so there's not like a stark difference. And we'll have some green transitioning there. Just trying to decide how far I want that to pull down. Same over here. Now I'm going to pull this down even more. And here, this is just going to be a little light, like I'm barely pushing at all, but I do want a little pinky and then purple on the bottom and then transitions to the blue. So there is a slight difference there. Now this is a very purpley blue. Gets a little bit pinker right along here, so I'll keep that still pretty light. Okay, and we can always come back and add more blue if we need to. Actually, I might add just a little bit more here while I'm looking. Okay. So I see just a hint over here. So I'm just ever so lightly putting it along, sort of where that dark line's going to be. And I'm just getting that in. This one's not quite as defined. It's sort of like a few little lines next to each other. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just kind of creating a little bit of texture in there. And again, not pushing very hard, like a medium pressure. And I'm only doing that for these medium, like the middle lines. I'm not focusing on any other lines right now. Okay, we'll start over here. So I'm not going to bring this pink down all the way because this is definitely like a green in here, but I do want it to transition a little bit. And I am being careful around some of these areas, but again, like this is a lighter color than that. So if I get a little bit over top of it, it's not a big deal. And again, colors reflect what's right next to them too. So if you get a little bit over top of it, it's just going to look like it's reflecting these colors back. Now I don't want to go over top of it like a whole lot, especially here with the green and the pink. So I'm being very careful to come right up to that. But I don't want like a line, like a white line where the pink and the green is. So like I'd rather go over it slightly than not. But I'm just making those defined edges right up against something. And as I blend, I could always push that color towards the green just to make sure it doesn't overlap too much. Now I'm going to start getting this in here. So it kind of gets a little purple and then it gets a little darker and then lighter again, like a dark blue. And this can go darker. It comes down here. And then it sort of transitions into that green color. That doesn't have to be perfect. We can fix it afterwards. Mine might be slightly crooked, so we'll fix that. Now be aware that these aren't like completely smooth transitions. Like this sort of goes closer to the line, and then as it gets to the tip, it kind of comes away and down. So don't just do the whole, like the same thing all the way. Not even covering that up. And if you like this color, like if you like a color a little bit more on a certain area, absolutely go for that. There's nothing wrong with that. Like let's say you like more of the pink, less of the blue, do that. Do more of the pink and less of the blue. I'm just going to check to make sure my colors are coming out. Yeah, I would say in the camera the colors are maybe slightly darker than what they are on here, and that could just be due to lighting. Again, I'm just coming through here, being very careful around some of these areas, but it also transitions out very lightly too, so I'm bringing this up very lightly towards this edge. And I'm using the very tip just to get right in here. Now, one nice thing, because this area has already been blended out, unless there's extra pigment on there that wasn't completely blended out when you blended it the first time, if you didn't use enough OMS or whatever you're using, the Mona Lisa mineral spirits, this won't blend out when we're blending these colors. So these colors could blend on top, but this green, as long as everything was blended underneath of it, it shouldn't move. So that's one nice thing there about doing some of your darker colors or some of the smaller areas first. So we'll see if I did a good enough job when I'm blending it out. So I call this almost like glazing, like I'm just pushing very, very lightly. Like I wouldn't even say it's light pressure, it's less than light pressure. It's the pressure of the pencil. I just want to get a hint of that color in there. Now I'm going to start defining this, but it'll still need to be darker, but at least it'll give us an idea. And then it sort of just fades off a little bit. Now I can still bring some dark blues in here as well. That'll help, and we'll see how that layers over top of this. Because it's definitely a little bit more like dark blue in some of these areas. So I'm not going to bring this pink everywhere. But I really like this like purpley color that I'm getting combining these two. So I'm definitely doing, you know, a little bit more here and there. But you can see, I hope you can see the color difference here, where this is definitely, you can see more of that blue coming through, and then this is more like pink here. And again, I'm going to leave some of this space down here for green, but we do want to overlap a little bit. Now it comes up quite high, so I'm going to leave like all that in there for the green. And then we can always come over top afterwards and tone that down, because I think I will do another layer maybe up here on some of the green. We'll just do a little bit more definition, because as it dried a little bit lighter. Now I'm going to go ahead and get, so this one has a little bit of a lighter area coming on top, so I'm going to go next to it. So like sort of on the right hand side of where that light's going to be. And just start putting that down. So this is going to come down here, and it's going to go transition into the green. Now this is like very pink in this area. Now I'm going to come along and sort of just leave a little bit of a line where I can see that light area coming down. And then once everything's blended out, we can go over and define that more with our white pencils, or a lighter colored pencil if that looks better. Now I'm just pulling this where I want that purpley color. Now again, just helping to find that edge between the blue and the pink. If I need to darken that up slightly, I can. So again, be careful here because we've got, you know, our blue edge and we've got our blue curve from the other petal. So I don't want to bring that down in there too much. There will be like a hint of shadowing of the pink against there just to reflect. So you could do just the very bottom of that curved area. But again, not too much because that is mostly blues in there. And then I'm just going to pull that pink out following the curve of this one. And then just pull that ever so slightly up into the blue there. And then here we've got a little more definition coming right along this edge here. Kind of going down to meet the bottom of that petal, and this is going to be pretty dark in here, so that's fine. I'm still getting a hint of this pink in there to make that purpley color. I don't see too much of it on this side, but I'm just going to put like a hint just so that there's not you know, straight stop. And I'm just going to pull this color out a little bit here. And then this is a lot more like blues in here. And I'm going to go ahead and get this light blue sort of on the edge here, because this is, again, the underside of this petal. It's pretty dark, so I've left it there. But I can just start to get a little bit of this blue in. And I might even just put like a hint of this pink in here, because I can see like an ever so purpley color, but again, it's pretty dark. But now that I've got some of those petals defined, I'm just going to come along and fill this in. And fill this spot in. And again, just keeping these edges nice and light. So if you think you're going to lose the placement here of where the top part of the petal is and the bottom part where it curves, then just leave these blank and just go in with your dark blue. And then you can always layer a little bit of the lighter blue on top of that. But I think right now that's fine. So I'm going to come in with my Derwent Lightfast. This is the Sapphire color. And this is going to be my darkest blue areas. So again, where I want like a defined edge, not pushing very hard at all. And then just kind of lightly blending it where it starts to go into the blue. Now, I could pull just a little bit more of that light blue right in this area here. I do see a little bit there. And this is a really pretty blue color too. Now again, following the directions of this is a little more like almost scribbly here. So I'm just following that direction. And it's not quite all the way to the edge. There's like a little hint of that light blue coming through, and then I'm pushing a little bit less as we get down here. So now starting to get some of these darks in, the petals are really going to start to take shape and form if they're still looking a little bit flat. And again, you can put as much or as little as you like, depending on, you know, the colors that you like that you're using. Maybe you really like this color and you want to put a little bit more, but don't put this into the very lightest areas, especially like where we've got light edges. You know, certain areas you want to be mindful of, but you could always put a little bit more of this in this area. Like that's not going to be a big deal. Okay. So wherever I do these edges, I'm still kind of pulling it slightly towards that light color just to help them transition. So I'm getting this area in. Now this is going to help this look like a little dip in the petal. So I'm kind of just glazing this over a few of these spots where I can see some darker color. And just darkening these two little areas where it sort of like dips again. And just bringing this color along here just a little bit. So every time you see me pause, I'm sort of like looking at my reference photo just to make sure I'm going in the right direction. I'm filling in as much as I need to. I'm really checking to see where these colors are going and stopping. And then we've got this shadow area under here. And this comes down into that green color. Now I'm just using this because it's sort of like a darker color, but again, I don't want to really overwhelm too much, so I'm just doing it lightly. And then I'll probably go back over with the pink just to kind of purpley that up a little bit more. Okay, so I will just grab that pink now so I remember. So this was the Caran d'Ache Luminance 083. And just lightly, I'm just coming over that. I may even just pull this out slightly down here. Okay, and then just switching back. Okay, so I'm carrying on with that sapphire color. Now on this petal, there's not a whole lot of darks, like dark blues. I can see it up here, the very edge. Now, I'm also trying to keep my artwork like in one position for you guys, but if you find it easier to like rotate your paper around to be able to get in an area, I'm trying to like rotate my hand and my arm around. But if you find it easier to do it the other way, then absolutely do that. Move your paper around. I've just got a couple of pieces of tape up here, just so it doesn't move around too much on me. Just for you guys, so it'd be easier. So I see it's a little dark, then it gets a little lighter, then it gets a little dark again, then a little purpley, so that'll be the transition with the pink, and then it gets quite pink and magenta like, so we'll leave that. And I'm gonna bring just a ever so slightly A little bit of this dark color along the edge. Not too much. But I think that's pretty much it. In this petal I may bring, no, I still think I want that more green, and we can always add blue there if we need to. So along here again, I'm just following these colors, so sort of where it dips in and then I just kind of feather out those edges. It is a little dark right up here, so I find it easiest to kind of come along and get the edges in, and then I know sort of where I need some of those darker colors to go. And then right along this edge is pretty light, so we'll keep it like that. Again, I'm going to have just a little bit of this dark color here just to separate these petals, because this petal is overlapping. So I'm just choosing to bump up this shadow a little bit more. And then I'm just going to start going in and getting these dark blues in where I see them. Now this is very purpley in here, so we can always fill this in and then come back over with our darker purple color. It's a little darker, more on the right side of it, so I am filling that in a little bit more. And then I'm just going to blend this color out. And I'm going along here, but I'm not bringing that color quite all the way to that edge. And it is a little darker right up here, but there's like a light spot there, so I'm just going to get that in a little darker. And then just ever so slightly purpling this up a little bit with the blue, and then again it gets a little more like magenta-y, purpley here, so we'll leave that. I can see this dark area under here. Now some of these petals, because like the light is catching them more, you can tell these ones here have a little bit more blue darkness in them and down here, but these areas here are more in light. So that's why, so don't force like darkness in some of these petals because it won't look right the way that the light's hitting it. Now if we need to add like a little bit, like there's a tiny little line here sort of like defining that area, you can do that, but don't add too much, especially with the darks. Your lights you can kind of swap out with any other lights that you want, your midtones and then your darks, but don't swap like a midtone for a dark because then it's going to look weird, if that makes sense. So I'm just pulling that out slightly, but again, I'm trying to keep that light edge, like I said. And I can even just move this dark up slightly if I want to like make it a little bit smaller. So depending how big of an edge you have there, you can always just slightly like scooch that dark down into that edge. But that's pretty much all I want to do is just right here. And this is a little bit more shadowy right there. And I may just put a little hint right here and just on either side of that lighter area just to help this stand out, this little vein or whatever it is. But I'm just doing that very light, very light. And again, if you're using that purple transition color, this would be like one of those areas that you would put it in if you need that. Okay, so just a little bit there just to help that pop. Now I'm going to go down and get this down here. And I'm going to do like I did with the stem, go over top of everything, but I'm going to do like sort of the edges and down here more dark, if that makes sense. And I think I may even glaze a little bit of the green over here too. And then same in here. Gonna get that line and under here, and then we sort of have like a lighter edge again. And just getting this area. So again, this is the bottom of that flower there, and now that I'm looking at it, I may add a little bit more blue on this side here, just where that petal transitions. And then this is going to be a lot darker under here. So, you know, take your time when you've got areas like this, just to make sure you're getting the right area. And this dark color doesn't quite go all the way to the edge. It kind of comes a little bit here and then like down. So we've still got a little bit of a light edge there. And as I'm gonna, we've got sort of a little darker area just in the middle here too. And just slightly on the edge. So I'm looking at those value areas where I can see some changes and stuff. A little bit here. So this is the slowest part, mapping everything out. Once everything's mapped out, then it goes a lot quicker after that. So there's sort of like a little dark edge here. And this area kind of comes up like where the petal's scooting down. Now I am going to make this very dark down here. So I'm going to push almost burnishing at this point, like I'm going pretty heavy. I would say this is like a medium to heavy pressure. And I'm just getting that little edge there that comes out. And then this just kind of like fades out. Okay, so now I'm just looking to see if there's any areas that I want to like add this darker blue color to. I think it's pretty good. I might just add a little bit more over top here while I have this. Now, because this is already like a pretty smooth area, it's just darkening the color. But all of the tooth underneath is filled in, so we probably don't even need to blend that out. All right, I'm gonna take my Prismacolor white now. You can use whatever white pencil that you have. I like this one because it's a little bit waxier, so it'll blend better than like my Polychromos. I like to use my Polychromos for any like final details. If this I can't get a sharp enough point for, then that one will work. So all I'm gonna do with this, because I feel like my light areas are as dark as I want them to go, I'm gonna use this just to add a little bit more pencil to the paper. So especially in some of these lighter blue areas, I'm just going to go over top of everything, and I just want to add like colored pencil to the paper just so everything will blend out nicely. Like I said, if you don't have enough layers, then your pencils won't blend out properly. Now I'm feeling I may need to come with a little bit of a darker color in here just to help separate this petal. So that's what I'm going to do. Is just come along here and just ever so slightly add this color in, and then we'll just kind of blend it out, but just to help separate that. And when we come on top with some of our like details and stuff, we can really get that edge nice and bright. So that's why here I still don't want to push very hard at all. I'm just looking at these lightest areas, and you can see it is lightening it a little bit just from going over top of it. So that's where I'm looking at, just these lightest areas that I need just a little bit more. But if I put more of the same color down, it's just going to darken it. And here I can be fairly messy because I really just need this down on the paper. Now here I almost feel like maybe I could go a little bit darker in some of this, to be honest. So that's what I'm gonna do. Now I still want some dimension, so I'll leave it at that. And then again, these lightest areas, I'm just going to go over top. And I can go over some of the dark ones as well. And this is just a trick that I use to, you know, make sure I have enough pencil down, and make sure I'm not darkening the colors up too much, because I can always go on top and add dark colors to this. Now I don't want to bring this color down into the shadow areas too much, because I do want to add some greens in there, and we'll do that before we blend. I'm just going over everything else except for my like darkest areas. And this, you can tell it's not very sharp at all. It doesn't need to be sharp. I'm just laying down some color. Well, not even really color. I'm just laying down like the waxiness of the pencil. So some of the blue areas, I'm not going over top of everything. I might go over top of that just a little bit just to tone it down, because I just want a light difference between that petal and that petal. Especially here where it's really light. Now, if you like the effect that you're getting with this, you know, and it's filling in, because I can tell some areas where I've got a little bit more pencil down, it is filling in like some of the tooth of the paper. You could just use this, or you could just use your blender pencil. But I'm still going to go ahead and blend mine out with the OMS, so you'll be able to see how that looks. I'm not really going over these like middle lines too much, unless I feel like it needs to be toned down or something. Now here I can come and push just like ever so slightly harder, like a light to medium pressure, just to help keep that light color in there. And then right back to just layering over top. Now this is a pretty like smooth transition, so that's why I'm just going over it and going over it. And this pink here is pretty light, so again, I'm just going to go over it. Now I'm not going up completely to that center part. So again, just sticking to the lightest areas. Now here the darker blue is a little bit lighter, so I will go over it. Because it sort of blends a little bit more than like stands out too much. Same with like up here and right up here. I'm going to go over some of that dark blue, but leave the rest. And sort of down in the middle of this. Okay, I'm going to grab that dark pencil once more and just really get that in there. And I'm just going to grab that pink and just, if there's anywhere I feel like I need to go over, I can, but I think that's pretty good, really. Maybe here it's a little bit like brighter. Okay, so I'm gonna grab my green now, and I'm gonna grab my mid-tone green, that 911 from Prismacolor, and that's what I'm gonna use for a lot of this in here. Now this green actually comes up. I don't know why I just started with this petal, because usually I start over here, but apparently I'm mixing it up right now. So this green comes up this vein here a little bit, so that's what we're gonna do. It almost comes right up to this stamen. And I'm just gonna feather this green up a little bit. And same over here. Now there's just a hint that I can kind of see coming up. And a little bit over here as well. Yeah, and this was coming up the stamen just a little bit. And then I'm just taking this pencil and just lightly like feathering it out. And so I'm just doing light feather strokes. And I'm going to take a little bit too down on the bottom of this petal on this back side here, just a little bit. And then I'm going to take just a little bit of that Viridian color and do that on the very bottom of some of these areas, just in those darkest shadows. Okay, so now look at yours overall. Do you feel like you have enough down to blend? If so, we're going to go ahead and blend everything out. If not, keep layering up until you're ready, or use your blender pencil, or just lay down enough color so that you're happy with your base layer. Now I'm going to use a slightly bigger brush than I used on the stem, just for a lot of these bigger areas. And then if I need a smaller brush for some of these smaller areas, I can use the smaller one. But using the bigger brush will just save a little bit of time. And I'm going to do the exact same thing, just dip it in. And I'm going to start probably here, and I think I'm going to save this green area here for the last. I'm going to try to keep it in with the pinks and the other colors and just blend those. So I'm just going through and smoothing all of this out. And I am scrubbing a little bit. But again, it's not moving like a lot of this color around. If I need to pick up more, I'll just go back in. Now I can always kind of tap off if I think I have too much on my brush, but really with some of these first layers, you can use a lot more of the OMS. And then if you feel like you need to build up, if it's not as smooth as you want, then you can certainly go in and blend again. And every time you go and blend with the OMS, I would just use a little bit less of it on your brush. And if you notice that the color's moving around or slipping around too much, then that's an indication that you have too much OMS on your brush. After you've gotten quite a few layers of colored pencil down. So right away, you know, you shouldn't notice too much movement really. It's just gonna like push that pencil right into the tooth of the paper. Now I do wanna be careful around some of these sides, so I'm just gonna move my hand around because I really want to keep my edges as sharp as I can, but I can come back with those pencils too and sharpen up some of those edges. But I hope you can just see the difference between this petal. Everything's just nice and smooth and it softens it out. It may look a little bit blurry right now, but again, we're going to come back with some of those details. And this is a little bit darker than what it will dry as, so it will dry a little bit lighter than what that is. And I kind of always start, you know, in the lightest areas and work my way out. I try to. But you can see sometimes, depending how much pencil I have down, it does move a little bit. And again, I'm even going still in the direction of the subject. So I'm going in the direction of the petal. So I'm sort of going in a more like up and down motion, so that if I do get any of those lines in there, they're going to be going the way the petal is, and it's just going to look like added detail that I didn't like intentionally add. So that's why all of the streakiness, I was kind of going in one direction, and now I'm blending in one direction, and that's why. So I'm going to be careful down there because we've got some of that purple going on. And if I notice an area is not quite as blended as I want, I can go back over it to a certain degree and kind of keep blending it, or I can add a little bit more of the OMS onto my brush. But at some point, once it starts drying, you kind of want to just let it dry, and then you can always go back and fix it after. Now, depending, you know, how sloppy you are around the edges when you're doing this brush, you may come over, and because there's color on this, so if I go like this right now, you can see there is a little bit of color. So if you really go over your edges a lot, you'll be painting that color around. So if you want like a really nice crisp edge, be mindful of that. You can come around with an eraser and erase some of that and really clean up some of your edges. So if that really bothers you or not, you know, just be mindful of that. So you may want to go to like a smaller brush. But again, I can erase that, or I can crop that out if I want to take like a, you know, have this as a print or something like that. I can digitally, you know, fix that. Now in here, I would probably switch to a smaller brush, you know, just so you make sure you're not dragging too much color around. But I feel pretty good with the way my first layer was blended out on some of these. Now I'm not going to intentionally like try to pull color from them. Now I'm noticing it's not blending as easily, as nicely, so I definitely need a little bit more on my brush here. Now I do have some blue that I had added in there, right? So I'm going to be very careful coming around here because I don't want to pull that dark blue out into areas that I don't want it. So I'm really using the tip of this brush to kind of get around that area. I just want this blended out just a little bit more, so I'm just kind of pulling that there. Now if I feel like I've got some of that dark blue on there, I just wipe that off before I go back in. Now this is quite dark, so I probably didn't need to wipe too much off, but so you can see I'm really pulling as much as I can, getting that color right up onto those objects that are still in front of it, because I don't want to leave any blank paper there. Although I think I've done a pretty good job like getting the colored pencil in there. Just using the very edge of this on those smaller areas. And I tend to hold my stuff up close to the edge. But again, even this, I'm not pushing. Like you can see, I'm just using the tips of those brushes. They're just barely like touching the paper. Now, if I'm doing a bigger area, I'll push a little bit more so I have more of the bristles touching the paper. But for a lot of this, I'm really just using, you know, the tip of some of those bristles to blend. And I'm just going back over, making sure everything's nice and smooth. Now again, I'm going to avoid that green for right now. you can see I am pushing a little bit more here, using a little bit more of the side of this brush. Now, the more you scrub and go over something too, you are risking lifting a little bit of that pigment. Like let's say I scrub and scrub and scrub over the same area, I could lift a little bit of that color up. So depending if you want an area to be a little bit lighter, and if you're using like good quality paper where it can handle a little bit of scrubbing. Now these are still soft brushes, they're stiff, but they're soft. So if you're using good paper that can handle that, that could be a way to lift some color if you've gone a little too like heavy-handed in some areas. And sometimes I just go over it if I notice I want a little bit of a better blend. Now I feel like my underside under here, I'm either going to have to darken or something for it to stand out. Actually, I think I'm going to have to darken the inside of this petal and lighten the outside a little bit, because that's what I see in the reference photo. Right now, it's a little too close to each other, so you can't really tell what's going on. So we'll fix that in part 2. But that is something that I'm noticing right now. So you could always, you know, make this area in here darker and make this lighter before you blend. But that's an easy fix that we can go on top of after. But if you are watching this first and then you're going to, you know, follow along afterwards, then that's definitely something I would have done different, made that just a little bit darker so that those two areas are more separate. Now I'm just lightly smoothing out these colors because there is still a lot of like texture in there, and I may need to go even darker in there. Now for this little spot down there, I think I am going to grab my bigger brush just because it's darker, there's a lot more pigment on there, and I'm at more risk of going over the edge of it. So I'll just grab my little brush here and maybe we'll blend. Yeah, we'll go ahead and blend this first. And then just a little bit here as well. And now I'm going to start blending those green areas. So I'm just going to blend this up into the blue a little bit just to give a little hint of that. I'm going to move that out of the way. And now, depending if I want the green area to be a little bit less, I'm going to blend down into it. If I want it to be a little bit more, I'll blend out of it, if that makes sense. So right now I don't want a whole lot more of it coming up. So I'm going to like blend and try to push that color down. And this is where I'm trying to maybe even lift a little bit of it. So I'm going over it, wiping it. So just trying to bring that color down and just wiping it off my brush so I don't have any excess of it. And I'm just trying to like lighten this transition edge, so that's why I'm going back over it. Because the green does come up a little bit, but I'm not sure I like it coming up that far. But we can put a little bit more of our colors over top of it. But at this point, we're going to have to let things dry. I just noticed this edge is maybe not as blended as it could be, so I'm just going to go right over top of that. And then maybe this one as well. And I'm just looking at my picture to see if there's anything else that I need to blend out right now. And I think this is good right now. So this is probably where we'll leave part 1. And I know part 1's been a little bit longer, but it does take longer to lay in all of our initial colors. Now we're going to let this dry really good. I would give it at least, 20-30 minutes to go ahead and dry. Next week, I'll have part 2 out, and we're just going to go on top with our colored pencils, do any of our details. We can get some of those details back in the stem here, and we'll do our details all in our petals. So I hope you guys enjoyed part 1. Make sure to like and subscribe, and please join me again next week for part 2 where we finish this up.